In this video, let's talk about Ubiquiti UniFi Layer 3 adoption. If you own UniFi devices, you must be very familiar with the way how you can adopt your devices into UniFi network using UniFi controller. But normally it works when your UniFi controller and your new device, they both sit in the same network or the same VLAN. To put it the other way, the network traffic doesn't need to go via your router. But in some situation, you do need to adopt a UniFi device in another network. Here on the screen, you see a UniFi support documentation and which talk about the layer 3 adoption. But there are two problems for me to follow this instruction. First, it's mainly talking about remote UniFi network application, which means, okay, you are a IT company, you support your business client remotely, how you can do that. But I'm just a home user. I only want to manage my UniFi devices in another VLAN. That's it. It's not really remotely. The second thing is the whole document is talking about UniFi ecosystem. You need to own a UniFi router, for example, UDM Pro. But in my case, I use pfSense. I need to explore how the instructions work for pfSense. I want to show you the 3 different ways to adopt your UniFi devices into a UniFi controller, which is in another VLAN. In this video, we are going to use this small UniFi PoE switch to do the multiple testings. And in the back of the device, there's a reset button. I'm going to use it several times because every time for every approach, I need to reset it so that I can simulate the starting from scratch. This is my current network settings. As you can see, I have the subnet for my LAN, which is corporate network, and it starts with 192.168.2. That's my default network. I use this VLAN, UniFi Management VLAN, to manage all my UniFi devices. And as you can see here, the VLAN ID is 15 because I use pfSense to route all the VLAN traffics. So here you don't see the subnet information, but the subnet is also 192.168.15 something, the same as the VLAN. This is the devices which are currently managed using this UniFi Cloud Key. As you can see in the IP address column, all of them have the 15 subnet, which means they are in the UniFi Management VLAN. You don't see it here, but for my UniFi controller itself, it is also placed in the UniFi Management VLAN, which means everything from the controller device, the cloud key, to all my devices, they are all in the same VLAN, which is not the default network. In this situation, if you want to adopt a new UniFi device, let's see. Now let's do a factory reset for this UniFi switch. As you can see now, it's showing the white LED color because it's not currently managed by a controller yet, and I even haven't plugged in the Ethernet cable yet. But let me reset it first. I hope the LED color will change. Yes, now it's flashing. Reset is working now, and then plug in the Ethernet cable. Let's see whether anything is happening in the UniFi controller. Okay, now we are back to the UniFi controller. As you can see in the left side, I have the UniFi controller. There's no any new yellow light device waiting for adoption. It's like nothing's happened yet. Now let me try to SSH into it because I just reset the switch, so I'm using the Ubiquiti username with the default password. Okay, I'm in. As you can see, the device type is US 860 watt. Let me see what's its current IP address. It's .2.102, so it's in my default network. Why? Because I plug in the Ethernet cable. The port has the OR network setting. That means this device will get the default network subnet IP address. But let me ping my UniFi controller. I know the IP address. Okay, I can ping it, no problem. So the UniFi controller can communicate with this new device without problem, but it's just simply cannot be adopted. Why? Because they are in a different VLAN. So to make the adoption possible, we need to do a level 3 adoption. The first approach we want to try, maybe it's the simplest way, because if you only need to adopt one device, it's very straightforward. You just need to SSH into your device. Let's do it again using the default password. Remember, we just reset the device. Now we are in. You simply type the command set-inform and then use HTTP. Pay attention, it's not HTTPS, it's just normal HTTP, and then the IP address for your UniFi controller, which is in another VLAN. In my case, it's 15.2, and then the port number is hard-coded 8080. That's it. That's the URL. Let me hit enter. See, the adoption request sent to this URL. In the left side, as you can see, it immediately appears in the UniFi controller and is pending adoption. Just like you plug in the same layer 2, the same network, that is the exact same result, and we adopt it. So easy, because just one simple command, you are done. Of course, the pro for this approach is easy, it's straightforward, but the negative part is for some UniFi devices, it simply doesn't come with SSH interface, so you have no way to issue this command. Or maybe you don't want to use SSH, or maybe you want to adopt many devices, not just one. So maybe this approach is too tedious because you need to go to each device to adopt them one by one. Let's discuss the second approach. Before we move on to the next approach, let's first check the result for the first approach. As you can see here, this UniFi device is showing the 2 subnet IP address. This is the one we just successfully adopted. But why the IP address is not 15, is 2, because we haven't changed the management VLAN yet. If you are interested, you can check my another video. I discussed in details about how to manage your UniFi devices, the different type of UniFi devices in your management VLAN. Because the purpose of this video is just to discuss the layer 3 adoption, so we are good already. Because even though they are in different subnets, we can see them, we can adopt them, and we can manage them. So it's good. Before we move on to the next approach, we need to reset this device again. Before the reset, we want to remove it from this UniFi network. We want to unmanage it. Let me go to the device, go to setting, go to manage, then let me say forget device. Now the device has been removed from the UniFi controller, and we are ready to reset the device to factory default. But this time, I don't want to use the hardware reset way. I want to try the software way. Let me SSH into the device again. And remember, we just removed it from the UniFi controller. The SSH username password are back to the default one. Let me use Ubiquiti. We are in again. This time, let me try the software way. Let me use this command. So basically, I want to run this shell script, which comes with the UniFi device. The parameter is restore default. Basically, it should achieve the exact same result as the hardware reset button. Let me write. It may take some time. Okay, as you can see, the white LED light is flashing on my device, just like I did the hardware reset. Okay, the reset is done. Let's try the second approach. Okay. Before we proceed with the second approach, let me log on to the switch. Let's see what's the current status. I use the infer command. Pay attention to the very last line. It says status unable to resolve this URL. Remember in the first approach how we enabled the adoption? Because we used the set inform command, we let the switch know the UniFi controller's IP address, right? But here we do not want to type in any command. I want the switch to know to get the information automatically by itself, right? So the second approach and the third approach are both focusing on this direction. So let's see what's the second approach, which is called DHCP Option 43. If you are interested in the background, you may search the Wikipedia, just find the boot service discovery protocol. It briefly mentioned the option 43. You can also read this RFC for further information. The RFC number is 2132. Basically, the so-called DHCP option 43 is a vendor-specific option. So in our case, we want the UniFi switch to get the UniFi controller information when it tries to acquire the IP address during the DHCP phase. So let's see how we can do that. Let's switch to the pfSense. In the left side, we have the pfSense. I'm in the DHCP server configuration page because I already have many VLANs. When you do the setting, make sure you make the change in the correct DHCP server. In our scenario, we are talking about two different VLANs. The default network LAN is where my UniFi switch is connected to, but my UniFi controller and all other UniFi switches are in the separate management VLAN. When you power on your new UniFi device, by default, if you don't change your port profile on your switch, it will connect to the default network, which is your LAN. It will connect to your LAN's DHCP server. So that's why we want to set the configuration for the DHCP server, but only for the LAN DHCP server. Let's scroll to the end. The very last blue button is the advanced DHCP option button. Let's click it. And here you want to see option 43. And the type you want to see string, and here the value part, that's crucial. It's multiple section string, so let me type it and then let me explain it. The first section 01, that's the so-called sub option for this option 43. You don't need to care about what it really means. So in our use case, you hard code 01, that's it, and then colon. Then 04, the 4 basically in our case, because I'm using IPv4. So for IPv4, the length is 4. So here the 04 is also kind of hard coded. Then the remaining part, that's the information you need to provide, which is your UniFi controller's IP address, but in a hexamal representation. In my case, I know my UniFi controller's IP address is here in the right screen. I type it here already, but it's in decimal format. I want to convert it to hexadecimal, right? There are many ways to do that. You can use your calculator, you can use Google or whatever tools you prefer. But here, for example, if I want to convert 192 in hexadecimal, in decimal mode to hexadecimal, here is C0, right? So that's why here you see C0 as the third section. In the same way, I convert the other three parts to this hexadecimal mode. Then I get this string. So 01, 04 hard-coded. Then you need to convert your UniFi controller's IP address to this format. Then you click Save. Because my UniFi switch already acquired the DHCP, right? Even though in my DHCP server side, the option is effective, but it won't impact my switch if it doesn't acquire IP address, right? To force it, let me do a power cycle, and then let's see what will happen in the switch and in my UniFi controller. I already finished the power cycle, and the UniFi switch is back up running, and I can see the LED light is still white. But let me log on to the switch, and let's type the same command. Here you can see the last line, the status text is changed. Now it's showing not adopted, which is a good sign. And in the left side, let me go to my controller. Let's see whether we can see it. Yes, we see it. It's pending adoption. So we successfully finished the second approach. During the DHCP phase, we somehow tell the switch that, okay, this is your UniFi controller's IP address. You can connect to it. That's how the connection is established. Before we start the third approach, let me restore my pfSense setting so that our third approach won't be impacted by what we said in the second approach. So let me remove this DHCP option 43 setting. Then save. Let me log on to this switch again. Type in infer command. Okay, now you can see the status shows unable to resolve, right? So it's back to the very original status. Now let's talk about the third approach. If you studied this error, you can see it already knows this URL. The only thing which is unknown to this switch is this domain name, UniFi. So as long as we somehow tell the switch what's the IP address for this so-called UniFi, we are good. Let's do that, because basically now we are talking about DNS server. Let me go to services. I want to go to DNS resolver because we want to resolve this special UniFi domain name. Let me go to general setting. Yes, we are here already. Then let me add a host override value. Here you want to say UniFi because you want to have the same name as here. In the right side, it's hard-coded, so we say UniFi. And you also want to put a domain name here. In my case, it's local domain. And then I know the IP address for my controllers, 192.168.15.2. And just give it whatever description you want. Let's say UniFi control. Okay, save it. Let me apply changes. In the right side, I'm still in the UniFi switch. Let me type the infer command again. It still says unable to resolve. Let me try ping UniFi. Okay, it's already effective. As you can see, it's showing the correct IP address. Maybe it's just the status is not refreshed. Let me run the infer command again. Oh, okay. It seems it takes time. As you can see here, it's showing not adopted, right? And let's go to UniFi controller to validate whether it's ready for adoption. Yes, as you can see here, in the left side, our switch is showing pending adoption. So the third approach, which is the DNS approach, was also successful. We already finished all the 3 different approaches. The first one, SSH, second, DHCP Option 43, and the third one, which is the DNS. So the first approach, it has nothing to do with pfSense, and the other two, yes, depending on what router you use, you may set them differently. So I demoed the pfSense way. Okay, thanks for watching.